The TI-89 is a really powerful calculator. Multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction are really easy to do on the TI-89. All the buttons are found on the right side of the keypad. The TI-89 will automatically simplify everything for you, so you don't need to do any of that. If your equation ever comes out wrong, check your parentheses and check the screen to find out where you messed up. Notice how you can't do higher power roots on the TI-89. You have to convert them to fractions and then use exponentiation to get the higher powered roots. One thing that you need to be mindful of is where you put your parentheses. The TI-89 needs to know exactly what you're doing when you're doing a calculation, so you need to know where you put your parentheses. Notice how just one set of wrong parentheses will mess up your whole equation, so you need to be careful to not do that. Putting functions into the TI-89 is also pretty easy. Just find the function that you want to put in and make sure you have the correct format. Here's the format of some common functions to get you started. Make sure you have the correct use of parentheses. Whenever something has a parentheses on the calculator, you have to be sure to close it. To get to the blue lettering, you have to press second, and to get to the green lettering, you have to press the green diamond right next to alpha. Another important thing to note when you're using your calculator is that x sine x is not the same as x times sine x. X sine x is not recognizable by the TI-89. You have to put the multiplication sign in between x and sine x for it to know that you're multiplying x and sine x. You have to be sure your calculator knows exactly what you're trying to do. Watch how if you're not careful with what you put together, the calculator will give you something that doesn't make sense. Sometimes you won't be able to find the function that you want straight on the calculator. For example, you can't find absolute value or log on the calculator. To do this, you need to use catalog. When you press the catalog button, a catalog will come up, starting with A. And then you could find every single function and everything that you could type into your calculator here. To search for something, look at the white letters on your keyboard above the numbers, and then you'll be able to find something. So if you press the equal sign for A, it'll come to ABS, and that's absolute value. Or you press 4 for L, it'll go to the L section, and you could scroll down and find log. Some other useful functions that you can find on your calculator are the greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, and less than or equal to. signs. To find those, you could press second and go to the decimal point for greater than, and second and 0 for less than. To get the equal versions, you have to press the green diamond and press the greater than or less than buttons. Most of the time in calculus, you'll be using your calculator to differentiate and integrate. To find the differentiate function, press F3 and 1 for differentiate. Then you'll get the squiggly D and an open parentheses sign. After the parentheses, you want to put the function that you're differentiating, in this case x cubed, and then after that, a comma. After the comma comes the variable that you're differentiating, in this case x. You could put other variables like y, z, t, but you have to be sure that your whole function is in that variable. Once you're done with that, you could just close the parentheses and press enter to get the derivative. If you want to find the derivative at a certain point, you could use the stick right next to the number 7. After putting the stick, put the variable that you're using and then the equal sign and then what point you want to find the derivative at. Then when you press enter, it'll give you the derivative at that point. You can also implicitly differentiate with your calculator. If you press F3 and up, you'll come to the implicit differentiation function. Press enter and then put in the equation that you want to differentiate. After you're done putting in your equation, you have to put in two variables. First, the variable that you're differentiating with respect to, and then the other variable. We can do the stick thing too to solve the implicit differentiation at a specific point, but it's a little bit more complicated. After you put in your x value that you want to differentiate at, you have to put and. To find and, you can press second and 5 for math, go down to 8 for test, and then go down to 8 again, and press enter for and. After you have and, you can put the y value that you want to differentiate at, and then press enter, and it'll differentiate for you. Integrating is a lot like differentiating on the TI-89. Just press F3 and 2 to get the integrating sign, and put in the function and the variable that you're integrating with respect to after it, and then close the function. If you want the integral to come out with plus c at the end, after the variable, put in the letter c. Definite integrals are also easy to do on the TI-89. After the variable, just add the lower and upper bound of the integral. Everything on the TI-89 will have the same format. You put the function, the variable, and then anything else that's important to it, and then you close it with parentheses. When you do limits, you have to put the function, the variable in the function that will approach something, and then the number that it will approach. If you wanted to approach from the left, after the number, you put another number that is less than 0. If you wanted to approach from the right, after that number you put a number that's greater than 0. You could always use -1 and 1. If your home screen ever gets cluttered, you could always press F1 and 8 to clear the home screen. Solving is probably the most useful thing you could do on the TI-89. You could solve almost any equation that you can think of on the TI-89. You just have to put in the equation and then the variable that you're solving for. If you want the TI-89 to solve systems of equations, follow this format. Don't forget that you have to put the variables inside the curly braces that you can find on top of the parentheses. To solve differential equations on the TI-89, press F3 and go all the way down to C to get the DE solve function. Just put the differential equation that you want to solve into the function. To find prime, you could press second and equal, and that'll give you y prime for the first derivative. To find sums on the TI-89, press F3 and 4. Here you put in the thing that you are summing, then the index of summation, the same variable that you're summing, and then the lower bound and the upper bound. If you ever put the wrong variable when you're doing something, it won't come out right, so make sure your variables match. You can combine all these different functions together. Like if you want to find the Riemann sum, you can use the limit and the sum together. Just keep track of what variables you're using and where you put your parentheses so you don't get mixed up. Look at how easy it is for someone to make a mistake when you do something like this. Sometimes it's better to do everything in more than one step so that you don't mess up. The TI-89 is a graphing calculator, so you could press the green diamond and F1 to take you to the place where you could put in the functions that you want to graph. When you're putting something into your list of graphs, you can only put it in terms of x. You can't use t or y or anything else. The TI-89 will also only graph functions. It won't graph things like circles or sideways parabolas. If you want to graph those, you have to make them in terms of x and graph both sides. When your picture doesn't look right, it's usually because you don't have your window set properly. To get to window, press the green diamond and F2. X min is the lowest value that x will have, so it's the x value on the left side of the screen. X max is the x value on the right side of the screen. Y min is the lowest y value on the bottom, and y max is the y value on the top. After changing your window, your graph should look closer to what you're trying to graph, or at least somewhat closer. You'll have to change these values every time to get something that'll work for you. If you only want to look at a certain part of a graph, you can add a restriction. If you add the stick that we used when we were differentiating, you can add what values you only want to see of the graph. So if you only want to see the graph from 0 to 2, you have to put 0 is less than x is less than 2. As a test, graph cosine of pi x from -1 to 1 and sine of pi x from -1 to 1. Also, change your window from -1 to 1 for the x, and for y, change it from -1.2 to 1.2. If you did everything correctly, your graph should look like this. There are lots of cool things that you could do on the TI-89 in the graph page. If you press F5 for math, you can see all the different things you could do. The first thing you could do is value. Find the value of the function at a specific point. Finding the zero or root of a function involves setting a lower and upper bound. The lower bound will be to the left of the zero, and the upper bound will be to the right of the zero. If you want to know how I move the cursor so fast on the graph page, press second and left or right and it'll jump. Finding a max or min works the same way as finding a zero. Just set the lower and upper bound to the left and right of an extrema. Sometimes the TI-89 is not 100% accurate. Notice how instead of saying 0, it has a really small number. Finding the intersection between two graphs is going to be really useful when you get to the free response section. Just select the first and second curve and the lower and upper bounds of the intersection, and the calculator will do everything for you. If you don't want to graph the functions to find the intersection, you can use the solve function and set the two equations equal to each other. There are a lot of other cool things to do on the graph part of the TI-89, so be sure to explore. Something really useful when you're doing your free response questions is that the graphs that you put into the y equals section of your calculator will come out on the home screen and everywhere else. To get the first function, you just put y, 1, and then the parentheses x, close parentheses, and then your function will come out. You could use this wherever you want to use it. You could use it in differentiation, integration, solving, whatever. The following are some examples of what you could do with the functions. This is useful when you're working with a long, complicated equation that you don't want to type over and over again. You don't always have to go to the list of graphs to get your functions. If you want to store a function directly from the home screen, put the function in and press the store button right on top of the on button, and then put the graph that you want to put it into. Then it'll be stored. If you're ever working with a long number really often, you could store that number into a specific variable, and then you don't have to type it out all the time. You could just use this variable wherever you wanted to use the number.